The forest was eerily silent, save for the crunch of frost under Audrey's worn shoes. At just 14, she had become a quiet hero in her small village in Nazi-occupied Holland. Tonight, a loaf of bread, hidden in a sack slung over her shoulder, was her mission. The bread wasn't for her. It was for a family hiding in an attic on the other side of the woods. Every shadow made her heart race, and every distant bark of a dog made her freeze. Audrey knew the risks. If caught, the punishment would be severe. Yet she pressed on, her petite frame barely visible in the moonlight. This was her small act of defiance in a world engulfed by fear. In the cramped basement, dim light from a single candle flickered against the walls, casting long shadows. Audrey stood in the center of a makeshift stage, her fragile form poised with elegance. The audience, a dozen war-weary faces, sat huddled on crates in the cold floor, their eyes filled with anticipation. As the haunting strains of a violin began, Audrey moved. Her ballet was not just an art form, it was a rebellion, a message of hope performed in utter secrecy. The silent audience, forbidden to gather, watched in awe as her graceful steps brought a flicker of normalcy to their lives. Outside, the muffled sound of soldiers' boots echoed through the streets, a stark reminder of the danger they faced. Yet for those few minutes, the war was forgotten, replaced by Audrey's quiet strength and resilience. Audrey crouched in the shadows, slipping a folded note into the sole of her ballet shoe. Her role as a courier for the resistance had become second nature, though her nerves still tingled with every mission. This note carried critical information about an upcoming raid and had to reach its destination without fail. As she walked through the occupied town square, a Nazi officer called out, his sharp voice cutting through the quiet. Audrey turned, her face composed but her heart pounding. "Why are you here, girl?" he demanded. With impeccable poise, she lifted her ballet shoes, feigning irritation. "Rehearsal," she replied, her voice steady. The officer glanced at her thin frame, dismissed her as harmless, and waved her off. Audrey's calm demeanor had saved her, and the vital message hidden in her shoe was delivered safely. The air in the tiny home was bitterly cold, the stove long extinguished due to a lack of fuel. Audrey lay on a thin mattress, her frail body trembling under a patchwork quilt. Malnutrition had taken its toll. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes sunken. Her mother, a former baroness now reduced to a caretaker, sat beside her, gently stroking her hair. "Just hold on," she whispered, her voice a mix of desperation and determination. "The war will end, and so will this hunger." Audrey wanted to believe her, but the gnawing pain in her stomach was relentless. As her mother left to fetch a cup of water, Audrey stared at the ceiling, dreaming of warm bread and better days. Her thoughts wandered to the books she had read before the war, stories of heroes overcoming impossible odds. They felt like distant dreams now, but they kept a small flame of hope alive within her. She imagined herself dancing again, her feet light, her body free from the weight of hunger and fear. Suddenly, the faint sound of bombing in the distance broke her reverie. She clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. "If I survive this," she vowed silently, "I'll bring light and hope to a world that desperately needs it." The village square was a scene of chaos and joy. Allied soldiers handed out rations to the starving townspeople, their arrival marking the end of years of occupation. Audrey stood in the crowd, her thin frame barely supporting her. A soldier offered her a chocolate bar, its shiny wrapper glinting in the sunlight. Audrey hesitated, tears filling her eyes. It was her first taste of sweetness in years. Breaking off a small piece, she savored it, the rich flavor overwhelming her senses. Around her, children laughed and cried, clinging to their parents as hope returned to their lives. For Audrey, the chocolate was more than a treat. It was a symbol of survival, a reminder that light could follow even the darkest of nights. In the heart of war-torn Europe, the small town seemed to freeze in a moment of eerie calm. Audrey, now tasked with delivering messages for the resistance, found herself navigating a labyrinth of alleys under the faint glow of a crescent moon. Her worn shoes barely muffled the sound of her steps on the cobblestones. The folded piece of paper tucked in her coat pocket felt heavier with every stride, not because of its weight, but because of its significance. Each word on it could save or cost lives. As she approached the drop point, a hollowed-out tree near the edge of the woods, she caught the distant sound of boots crunching on gravel. Panic swelled in her chest. German soldiers patrolled this area frequently, their suspicion and ruthlessness notorious. Audrey quickly ducked behind a crumbled wall, her heart pounding in her ears. The cold air bit at her face, but she dared not move. From her hiding spot, she saw the shadowy forms of soldiers passing mere feet away. She held her breath, praying the sound of her rapid heartbeat wouldn't give her away. After an eternity, the footsteps faded into the distance. Gritting her teeth, Audrey completed her mission, knowing that fear was a price she would pay to fight for freedom. Audrey knelt in the dust of a remote Ethiopian village, her delicate hands cradling a malnourished child. Her signature poise remained, but her eyes brimmed with sorrow. As a UNICEF ambassador, she had traveled to the corners of the world to aid children in desperate need. The horrors she witnessed reminded her of her own struggles with hunger during the war. "We cannot turn a blind eye," she said to a group of reporters, her voice filled with quiet determination. Audrey's visits brought not just food and medicine, but also hope. Her fame had become a tool for change, and she wielded it with grace. The children, unaware of her stardom, saw her as a beacon of kindness, a woman who truly cared. In the soft glow of her study, Audrey sat at her desk, penning a letter to her son. Her hand trembled slightly, not from age, but from the weight of her words. "My darling," she wrote, "never forget that kindness is the greatest gift we can offer the world. It is what sustains us, even in the darkest times." Outside, the garden she cherished bloomed under the setting sun, a testament to her nurturing spirit. Audrey sealed the letter, a gentle smile gracing her lips. Her legacy wasn't just in her films or her beauty. It was in the lives she had touched. As the camera pans out, the image of Audrey fades into a montage of her humanitarian work, her films, and her unforgettable smile, leaving viewers with a sense of awe and inspiration. Audrey Hepburn's life was a testament to resilience, grace, and unwavering kindness. From a young girl risking her life in war-torn Europe to a global icon using her fame for humanitarian causes, her story inspires generations. Audrey believed that true beauty lay in compassion and that even in the darkest times, a single act of kindness could change the world. Her legacy lives on, not just in her films, but in the countless lives she touched with her generosity and courage. What lessons do you take from Audrey's incredible journey? Let her story remind us all to be the light for others. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold tales of legendary Hollywood stars.